Welcome to the urgency of now, ending isolation by creating effective community ecosystems. This is part 4 of a 5-part series, and today is Hope, Connection, and Technology, Reimagining Family Peer Support. It's going to be a great webinar, but before we get started, and I should say, we will be recording the webinar and sending up follow-up information after the webinar ends. But before we get started, I have a message from a dear friend of the Federation, Vesper Moore, and I'd love for you to hear from him.
Hey, what are you doing in October? Wrong. You are going to Orlando. You care about mental health. You're going to Orlando. You care about family issues. You're going to Orlando. You care about behavioral health policy. You are going to Orlando, my friend, to the National Federation of Families Conference in October 12th to the 15th at Disney Springs to talk about policy. There's going to be great speakers like myself, talking about our work at Kiva Centers and crisis alternatives in the community and the work we're doing nationally around policy, along with Carolyn Cole of Paris Hilton's 1111 Media. It's going to be such a great conference. I'm so excited for families, youth, and people who are most impacted really leading the charge in this conversation. Join us in Orlando. I hope to see you there.
That's great. Thank you, Vesper, from far away. Our conference, how many people? If you react in the little heart button at the bottom, how many people are registered for the conference here? Anyone? Oh, I see one. Hi, Melinda. Oh, I see Melinda. I know, Melinda, you are. Oh, I see people. If you're not, I would encourage you to register. And the hotel rooms, the prices are going to go up in a couple of days. So if you're registering, register now so you can get a hotel room at the event facility at a really good price. So please, please, please register and book those hotel reservations as soon as you can. Now I am going to turn this over to Dr. Linda Gargan, our Executive Director. Linda?
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to jump in here and say a few words. I am the Executive Director of the National Federation of Families, and we're so happy to have you here today. So here's a question. How many of you are a little bit nervous about AI? I know I am. I keep seeing these stories about AI breaking out of its whatever. It's very confusing. I think what you're going to see today is an unbelievable way that AI is going to be so, so, so helpful with our families. We have a wonderful group of presenters here today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves because I always think that's a much more authentic way to do it. But with that, I will turn this over to Malika and we will get started.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gargan. I have a presentation and I will share my screen. Let's see. Can everyone see my screen okay? Okay, amazing. Well, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning if you're like me from California, or very, very good morning to those calling in from Hawaii. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much to the NFF for making space for this conversation. In this webinar, as Dr. Gargan mentioned, the Federation is highlighting innovative solutions to supporting family peer work. And today we'd like to turn our attention to a very hyper-specialized solution to highlight what technology can and cannot do for family peer support. My name is Malika. I am the CEO and co-founder of Psyche Care. We are an organization that works with caregivers of children who are coming out of a crisis point of care, which usually can be an emergency department or an inpatient stay, and they're transitioning home. We support them through a tech-enabled parent peer support program. I started this with my co-founder in 2023 after my own lived experience in navigating both the mental and physical healthcare system for a chronic illness. I saw how demoralizing and debilitating it was just to navigate the system, and I became incredibly passionate about starting a family advocacy organization of my own. Our title question today, in kind of elucidating and highlighting what we've been working on, is how does AI help? You will notice that we're not going to answer it in the abstract today. We're going to answer it three separate times from three different seats at the same table. So first, I would love to highlight Kelsey. And Kelsey, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelsey Engelbrocht. I am a marketing and communications consultant. I work part-time for the National Federation of Families. I'm also a mom to a terrific 11-year-old boy, and I am based in Scottsdale, Arizona. Hi, Terry. I see you there.
So Kelsey is going to answer a lot of these questions from the lens of a caregiver who used Psyche services. And Kelsey came through our program a few years ago before most of the tools that we're going to highlight even existed. But she will tell you what she needed, what she got, and how technology actually supported her journey through the program. And next we have Mel. So Mel, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, nice to meet you all. My name is Mel. I am a coach and I also do a lot of consultancy for different organizations broadly around mental health as well as other things. I've been working with Psyche Care now for quite a number of years. It's getting on now. And I'm excited to connect with you all. I am in Minnesota.
Thank you so much, Mel. And what's really special about the conversation that we have here today is Mel and Kelsey were paired together throughout Kelsey's support journey with Psyche. So Mel will really be able to highlight what work is actually going on behind the scenes, as well as in that connection with a caregiver, and what changes when part of that load can be picked up by something other than just her own memory. It can be picked up by AI. She'll also share some perspectives of what it means to be in a supervisory role and a support role to other peers and that back end magic that makes our provider team run. And then I finally am going to highlight a lot of these answers from the program side. So, what we chose to build as an organization, what we deliberately refused to build, and how we check whether any of it is working, as well as the future of the organization and where we aspire to go next. One thing I'd like to highlight that kind of piggybacks on Dr. Gargan's point, and I hope that this is emphasized throughout this talk, is that AI doesn't have to be scary. There's a bunch of conversations around automation, and there's a huge question in mental health care about replacing human-centered mental health supports. And this is a real question. It's a completely valid one. I ask myself that question too. We at Psyche know that retaining the human-to-human connection is essential in this sort of support. AI truly can be a force for good if we make sure that we continue to center that human-to-human connection. In our model, the caregiver never directly talks to AI, not once. There's no chatbot for families. That technology sits behind the peer specialist and the provider team. In the case of Psyche, AI makes back-end tasks a whole lot easier, and I hope that it sparks questions about AI and how it could best support your teams and your work moving forward. And with that, Kelsey, I'll hand it to you.
Thank you, Malika. I'm just having a moment of reflection here for a couple of reasons. One is there's an attendee in the audience who was actually at my baby shower. We used to work together, and so it's very interesting to be sharing my story of my now 11-year-old with someone who was there before he arrived. And also, I was talking with Malika about this before we got on, that I'm realizing I'm reflecting on a point of crisis that was very chaotic. And so as I tried to get prepared for today, it's hard to put everything sort of in order. So I'm just going to do my best. So my son is 11, and challenges with him began really as soon as he was in preschool. The first time he was flagged for any services, we went through an assessment and did not qualify for any support because we were not a Medicaid family. I know that's an experience that others have had. And I think I also want to highlight that I spent over 11 years working in education before I came into the family-run and behavioral health area 14 years ago. And I think that's important because it really underscores the sense of guilt and feelings of aloneness as I went through this journey, because it was as if I should have known better or seen things differently or just been more informed. So I just wanted to mention that. So my son really struggled in preschool. He was actually asked to leave his first preschool at 3. He went to his second preschool, and they worked with me and kept him in the school all the way through kindergarten. But during that period, it became, almost daily notes, daily phone calls, constant struggles, and my worry and anxiety as a mom, began to really build. Had lots of frustration, of course, and was trying all different kinds of parenting styles, parenting strategies, reward systems. Nothing really seemed to work. So in addition to, getting in trouble in school, he also seemed to be struggling with executive functioning skills. So I was frustrated with behavior. I was frustrated with the inability to get through a school day. But at the same time, we couldn't find a backpack and we lost water bottles every day. And so there was that other layer of just kind of chaos in my life and trying to hold it all together. When Reese is his name, when he started in first grade at a local charter school, things only escalated. And by the time he was in third grade, basically he was being left in the hallway because he couldn't get through a lesson in class. And at that point, he had been asked to not come to the after school program. It was just a really, really challenging time. We did try lots of things in addition to just strategies and parenting styles. He went through a social emotional learning program within his school, which he graduated from. And then I had to pay out of pocket for therapy, talk therapy for about 6 months, which was really, expensive, but it was kind of all I knew to do at that point. And here in my area, finding a good therapist that would take any kind of health insurance was really just an impossibility. And those that would had huge waiting lists. So that was just, an investment that we made. He was a little bit young in my experience for talk therapy, and we only did that for about 6 months. It didn't seem to move the needle at all. So we did then go through a testing process, which honestly was just a nightmare to get through, very confusing. We got wrong results initially. They hadn't actually completed some of the testing and gave us a report saying that he was diagnosed with autism and an emotional disorder, but then came back the following week and said, "Oh, sorry, we that was wrong." So without going into all the details of that, it was an additionally very trying part of our experience. So that all sort of led me up to a few months later, I was introduced to Malika and to Psyche Care. And as we go further into our presentation, I'll get to share about that.
Thank you so much for sharing, Kelsey. And I think a couple of things that your story highlights is the kind of winding journey that it takes after, seeking help. It's not necessarily that the first person you go to is going to be the perfect fit. It's a journey of ups and downs and trying out different sorts of supports, whether clinical or non-clinical. What you're mentioning about not being able to access supports because your family wasn't on Medicaid and what this means when you're paying out of pocket and evaluating support options. Your story is so similar to the families that we see coming in our door so frequently. And that story is that caregivers have been through the journey. They've tried out different outpatient services. They've been to the emergency department. They feel like there are moments of crisis that are cyclical, that they enter every other week or every month. And regardless of how many times they go through this process, they just feel like they don't know where to go, who to talk to, and what to do in the home environment. So many caregivers have cited waking up every day and going to bed every night, just desperate for finding something that's going to work for their family. And very rarely, although the caregiver is dealing with so many challenges in navigating care, very rarely support the caregiver, right? I think that's something that is quite obvious about the American mental health care system. So when we started Psyche, we realized that this was the gap that we wanted to fill. We really wanted to support the caregiver and allow for a caregiver specific space to access, a place where you as a parent can come to and vent and navigate goals identification and skills building. And the program that we built was entirely a telehealth-based parent peer support program. So what a caregiver gets is they're able to be intaked by our intake specialist and connected to a parent peer. So this is someone that has that lived experience in navigating systems and really can understand the journey and understand how a caregiver might be feeling in that moment. The sessions that they have with parent peers are either via telephone or telehealth. So this could be video conferencing. And oftentimes we're working with a caregiver once or twice a week via 1 hour session that has a blend of peer support, goals identification, skills building, as well as texting in between those sessions. So caregiver feels very well supported outside of these sessions in case they need any additional help or advice or just want to celebrate successes. Typically, we're working with caregivers for about 4 to 6 months, and we notice that as they transition through our program, they feel a greater sense of caregiver capacity and agency and the confidence in being able to navigate these systems for their family in the long term. And those are the goals that we really want to achieve with our program. But we've run into a lot of challenges in implementing family peer support that I know are paralleled by a lot of the organizations and family peer supporters that are sitting in this room today, which are there are a lot of tasks on the back end that accumulate and contribute to the burden and burnout for a family peer specialist. Number one, this could be caseload. So a peer is carrying so many families at once. And it's hard to keep track of the families, and oftentimes peers can feel burnt out. Number two, the paperwork that we're also familiar with, the documentation that ultimately serves this billing system and may not necessarily serve the connection with the family. But these are tasks that are critical and they get written for after hours because there's just no room for it during the day. And finally, this hourly pay question. So peer specialists are amongst some of the lowest paid billing codes in behavioral health and doing some of the most emotionally exposed work in behavioral health. So, functions of our service, such as text-based peer support, is still largely unreimbursed in most states, which means that the things that families need are exactly the ones that the system won't pay for or support. So being able to eliminate or at least reduce the amount of back-end burden and tasks is really critical to ensuring the longevity and the support for a family peer specialist. But it just doesn't seem like it could be well supported with the uh, infrastructure, the tools that we have currently available to us. So oftentimes when a system might hit its limit, we might hear that we should build more institutional beds or serve fewer families and reduce capacity, which might mean increasing wait lists and not really accessing or increasing access to care. What I want to highlight today is a new answer that can be brought up because of AI and because of technology, where we're able to support more families because of technology, and take the work off of the peer that was never meant to augment or support the relationship in the first place. How do we continue to use technology to support that relationship and make everything else easier? And with that, Mel, if you'd like to share. Oh, Mel, I believe you are muted.
Thank you. I am muted. So, my role within Psyche Care has been really as a coach to our families. I've been involved in the recruitment of other coaches, and then I also supervise those coaches, as well as being involved in the continuous improvement of our systems and our processes within the team. So, it's just such a joy to work with a team that's always looking at growth and development and improvement. So, I love that. So, something I'm very passionate about is really pulling apart the mental load that comes with families who come to us, and figuring out what their needs are and reducing their mental load. But for me to be effective as a coach, when you're coaching a lot of families, and I already haven't got the best memories it goes, I really use those AI prompts that have been developed in our systems to make sure my head is in the game for the family that I'm about to coach, that I'm up to speed with what we did last week, what we spoke about, with their background, and I have a bit of a game plan going in of what things might look like in this session. And the AI really serves to help me with all of those things. So it's all, and I'm not the techie person in the team, just for reference. So the AI really helps the coaches to be able to see quickly what's going on, and it helps us flag priorities for the sessions. So right before the call, you really know what's going on. Think about if you did back-to-back calls, the mental load of that for the coach would be significant. We know that a lot of systems in healthcare ride on people doing work after hours, often for free, essentially. and often it's women. And I'm not keen on women working for free in general. So something that's important to us is that it's realistic, that people can note take and it can be automated. Now, these days, I've basically switched almost fully to speech to text in my life. And the great thing is I can blame the speech to text if it doesn't get it right. But I really do use that in my day-to-day life, and even have an AI just rephrase it for me. Just reduces the work for me in terms of thinking about paraphrasing this, that, and the other, and making sure everything is downloaded from my brain quickly and efficiently. And we want to equip our coaches with all the tools that they can use to make their work and their note taking and their documentation after a session to be super fluid, efficient, quick, and high quality. And so AI has been really powerful in enabling us to provide that space for our coaches and to stop that kind of you do all your coaching and then you do all your notes at the end of the day, or you're trying to fit it in. And we don't want to create that culture and environment in our organization. So and that's something that the system deeply helps us with. Something that oh, are you pointing this out to me, Malika?
Oh, sorry. The mouse is just my
Um,
fault.
Often, practitioners, healthcare workers are in systems, and the systems become large, complex, unruly, difficult to use, and creates a lot of frustration and burnout. And the last thing we want to do is create burnout in our coaches. That is an opposite spirit to what we want to deliver and create in our organization. And so AI helps us stand by our principles and our values as an organization. And that's something that I love about it. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. So I think parents highly value someone that stood where they are standing. And I have both worked in mental health extensively and also had my own child have challenges. And I think, as you can probably tell, I'm not from around here. And so I've worked in systems outside the US and within the United States. And I think one of the things that struck me when my family were going through challenge was that I was given a list of resources at the like chasing a pot at the end of a rainbow, where there was no one at the end of it, but everyone kept saying to chase it. And so I had a real accurate understanding of the frustration families are dealing with and the struggles they experience within the systems we are using at the moment. And so that really lit a fire under my feet to kind of try and address some of those gaps and blocks in the system, to make sure we can connect better with families and really understand in an authentic way, not in a false, oh, I totally get where you're coming from, throwaway comment manner. Like I really care about sitting in that space with that parent, holding them in that moment and saying, here's the flashlight, let's go this way. That's kind of been my vision in my mind is I'm going to lead you. Let's walk this way. This is the way we're going to go. We are in a country with a lot of siloed systems, right, that don't talk to each other. It's very complicated. It appears that no one person has the answer to any of the systems. And so it's really difficult. And I want to take the mental load, and we as an organization want to take the mental load away from families when they are dealing with already incredibly stressful, vulnerable, exhausting situations.
Yeah, thank you, Mel. And there's so much intentionality in what goes on from, the direct relationship between you and a caregiver. And, I also framed a little bit more about, where exactly we use technology to augment all of this. And Kelsey, if you wouldn't mind sharing what that experience was like, being at the core or receiving these services and what that journey felt like.
Thanks, Malika. I'm going to talk about the sort of breaking point in Reese's story a little bit later, but at this juncture, this is when I sort of was first introduced to the program and to Mel. And in the about 18 months leading up to that first phone call with her, I had increasingly just become sort of overwrought and anxious. A simple phone call or email that would come in would just sort of wreck me emotionally for the day. I couldn't think, I couldn't work. I was highly emotional. And so the first time that we got on the phone together, it was certainly authentic because I literally just burst into tears. I don't think I even realized how much I had been pushing down to try to hold it together. I knew that my son was hurting. I knew that there was likely some trauma occurring with his experiences at school at that point, and I felt totally hopeless. I didn't know what to do. I had tried everything. Again, coming from an education and a family-run behavioral health background, that was especially overwhelming and disappointing and scary. So yeah, the first time I spoke with Mel, it was really like just a huge release of pressure, more than I even realized I think I was carrying. And she was able to give me digestible actions, strategies to take that were for myself, as she said, to try to relieve some of the mental load that I was experiencing. And that was just so different and unique, because all the things I had tried before, anyone I had spoken to before, it was more like they were giving me another list of things I had to do on top of everything I was already doing as a mom and a caregiver who was drowning. And it was the first time it was like, okay, I can do this. I can try that strategy this week, because it was really for me and it was to help me feel better. And she would really have me look at, okay, what are you most worried about right now? What is causing you the most distress right now? And what can we do to tackle that rather than feeling all of it at once? So it was a very powerful beginning of the program. And I could see that it was different from anything that we had tried right away, because it was really about taking care of me so that I could take care of him.
Mm.
Yeah, I think what I find really striking about both Mel's and Kelsey's feelings and experiences as being part of the program is that there is so much nuance to that connection, both from the caregiver's perspective of what they're experiencing and the complexity of those emotions and that feeling of, yeah, pushing everything down and this being the first space that they truly get to access where they can release and unload everything that they're feeling, but also the perspectives that the peer or coach has, right? Of being someone that has also navigated the system and now is providing support to other folks, right? Like that is something that is also pretty complex and can bring up some very particular and nuanced emotions. And so one of the deliberate design choices we made as an organization is that this human to human connection is something that we don't want to touch. There are a lot of AI chatbots that exist on the market. There are a lot of apps. But before we even started Psyche, we interviewed hundreds of caregivers just to understand what they wanted and what they don't want. And time again, we heard caregivers don't want an app. They don't want another piece of technology. They want someone that they can text, that they can call, that really understands what they've been experiencing. One of the kind of most frequent places of being able to meet other parents or caregivers were Facebook groups. And we noticed that a lot of parents only had access to Facebook groups in order to connect with other people. So we really wanted to center that human connection in what we were building, but knew that technology could augment it. So what we have been able to do is build a technology layer that sits behind the peer, so that the caregiver never talks to a model. Truly the main asset here is building up that trust in that relationship. I don't know if any of y'all have tried a mental health app before, but I have. And oftentimes I might use it a couple of times and it might provide something that's useful, but there's nothing really that's keeping me there or allowing me to stick with it. So when you combine both the trust, that relationship, as well as skills that are implementable, actionable, and useful to the caregiver, that really allows for long-term uh, kind of commitment to the program from both sides. And we see that a lot of caregivers will stick with us for 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, and beyond because they find this to be such an incredible and important relationship in their lives. And, just to highlight some of the things that the technology is able to do is it's able to ensure quality of these sessions. It's able to document for the sake of the coach and the peer. And it really helps with training. So it really helps with the delivery of that support. As we train our peers internally, they have previously received either a certification for family peer support or depending on the state, also as a community health worker. We're able to leverage AI to assess the readiness of a peer. Are they ready to go and support other caregivers? Are there other ways that we can support this peer in skills building and feeling comfortable with the role? As they're ongoing in the role and they're supporting families, how do we make sure that this continual feedback to the peer and that supervisors can be notified if a peer might need a little bit more support in delivering the support to the caregiver? How do we support the peer in documenting the notes from each session, right? That speech to text, being able to be hands-free and not be tasked with documentation during the session and only spending a little bit of time of documentation after the session. And the system can now track the warning signs, the triggers, the points of escalation so that we as a support team can be more proactive in touching base with the caregiver, checking in with the caregiver, not just being a reactive support that the caregiver turns to in a moment of crisis, but really being able to check in whenever necessary. So the technology doesn't talk directly with the caregiver. It's a way to really add some superpower to our peer specialists and the work that they already do. And Kelsey, I know you mentioned that you wanted to share some specific moments or, the feelings that being part of the program over the course of months brought up.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I just love Mel. Mel changed my life, and it was almost hard to be done with the program because she did so much for me. There were, as Malika mentioned, there were check-in texts that would kind of keep me moving things along or remind me if I wasn't staying on top of strategies. I liked those, but the bigger thing was the note taking. I had no experience with that kind of technology, and I know you're using a lot more now that has, developed in the last couple of years. But what I realized upon reflecting is I could just be present and raw and real and authentic with Mel because after that first call, we got notes and it was all captured and the strategies were there. And so I realized I didn't have to be remembering anything. And it really allowed me to just relax and sort of lean into the process, knowing that that would be captured nicely. And I had it immediately afterwards. So for me, the technology helped a lot in terms of this wasn't another thing I had to do, right? And I wasn't trying to track everything that I said or that Mel suggested. And so I think that made a big difference in my ability to benefit from the program and to really connect with Mel. I did have a couple of pretty big aha moments. One was, so when Reese went through testing, ADHD, of course, was mentioned and possibly an emotional disorder. But basically, I had this kiddo who was hurting, who was angry, who was getting in trouble all the time, who couldn't remember any of his stuff, who felt nothing positive at school, but who also was bright and had lots of academic potential and is a natural athlete. And I just was, afraid for him, but we couldn't really figure out, like, this didn't look like an emotional disorder to us. It didn't, ADHD, sure, but it didn't make sense. We couldn't figure it out. And he had all these other small things that were like, making sounds or kind of repetitive behaviors, but it wasn't autism. And so anyway, Mel said, could it be a sensory integration disorder? And that was a huge light bulb for me. He was, as we've discovered, making sounds because he was having a hard time with noises around him. In a busy classroom, he would make noises or do things with his mouth to be able to sort of control the sound. And Mel, I don't remember if I tried this strategy when you and I were still meeting, but I went and bought bulk sugar-free candy. And when he would start making noises in class, the teacher would slip him one of those and he could suck on it. And it gave him something else to do besides making distracting sounds. So this one potential idea of a diagnosis gave me a whole new direction to look into, helped me really begin to understand better what was going on with him and helped me come up with new strategies, which just sort of brought me back to life a little bit as some of them began to help. But the biggest piece of this, I think, for me was I just saw my kiddo differently. I was able to, I'm going to cry. I was able to hurt for him and love him and see him in a new way and kind of step outside of my own fear and pain and really just re-energize me as his advocate and his mom. So thank you. It was life-changing.
Well, You're gonna set me off, Kelsey. I'm gonna start crying here. I do remember the candy intervention. And just to provide some context for that, I have a master's degree in sensory integration, and I previously lived in the United Kingdom. And within the United Kingdom, I mean, there are challenges everywhere. So I'm not any way declaring that it's a good system that's much better or anything like that. But what I am saying is, in terms of sensory and true in-depth sensory analysis of a child in correlation with mental health is more established there, as it is in Australia and New Zealand, other countries. I'm actually involved in a global project on this. And so for me, it is a missing key in a lot of our kids, and they get sent to talking therapy or they get given medication, but that piece is missing. And that piece doesn't get necessarily addressed in the school system either, because schools, within the confines of their regulations, give strategies, but the piece underneath it, which is the analysis, is missing. So just to provide, I could talk all day about this. So that's just a little summary background of how we came to kind of address some of that for Kelsey. Yeah.
And Mel, maybe a little bit more on, I know you highlighted it earlier in the presentation as well, but what sort of tasks did you have to do as a coach to Kelsey? And what were the actions that you took to support her with the skills, the goals identification, and when did technology support you in that? And what were some opportunities that technology could be built to address?
Yeah, I think, and if we're thinking 3 years ago when we were working with Kelsey, we've evolved so much further, right? And so we have even more established systems. But for me, when I'm coaching, I'm so deeply in the moment with that person, like a flow state. And so I don't have to break up that connection to go and check something or look at something, because all of the information is there immediately. I think whenever you're in the middle of an emotional moment with somebody and they suddenly they're looking for something on their screen, and it kind of breaks that for you. Like it feels like, oh, they're not paying attention to me, they're looking for something. And, occasionally that might need to happen. You might say, well, I'm just going to check on this. But broadly speaking, the technology allows us to be really present in the moment with that person. And we do have a flow that we encourage coaches to follow, and it enables us to check on whether they are able to follow that accurately. So we do look at risk assessment, mainly because we want to highlight any emergency or urgent issues. We can also develop those goals and strategies. And so they can all be captured by our system, and then we can review it the next week. And in between, the parent is able to communicate with our system if they get stuck, if they weren't able to do it, if there was a problem, if they need some help, whatever it might be. Or maybe a higher priority has shown up and they might need some support and advice in between sessions. And all of the tech allows us to be in the moment with the parent, truly listening, actively taking on board what are their challenges, what are the needs. And as Kelsey alluded to, so many systems look at the child in isolation, and you've got a burnt out, exhausted parent who is trying everything humanly possible to find a solution and is getting turned away, or they're being told very tokenistic advice like go and breathe, do some deep breathing, or go and have a bath, whatever it might be, and it's just tokenistic advice that doesn't address the needs of the family, and I'm not a fan of that. So we really want to deliver beautiful, pragmatic, powerful advice, support, and strategies for our families. And I'm able to do that, and I'm able to train coaches to do that because we have all this tech doing all the mental labor behind the scenes for us. And that is so freeing.
Right, definitely. And I think, Mel, you're capturing something that often times gets re-emphasized with family peer work, which is the beauty of a family peer is being able to have that contextual understanding of what it feels like to be in a caregiver's shoes. And this might also mean, coming from a similar cultural background or knowing the geography and the supports and the services that are accessible to a family that's in the region. But what this means is when you start to add more families to your caseload, there's so much context to each one of these families that oftentimes is hard to track for a single parent peer. And we're not trying to say that each parent peer is going to take on hundreds of families at once. That's definitely not our goal here. And, making sure that peers feel supported and don't feel burnt out is critical for us. But one thing that we do want to highlight is this technology allows for that context to carry over. And Mel, as you mentioned about not having to take notes and not having to be distracted and it helping with recall, this is a critical part of, not only serving a large caseload, but serving a large caseload of families that have entirely different reasons for coming into Psyche and have entirely different challenges that they're facing in the home environment. So how do you make sure that you ensure that quality and the specificity and the support that you're providing as you're increasing these caseloads? And one thing that's interesting is, it would be really difficult to have 30 families that are meeting with you once or twice a week at once, right? Like that's just not how we're able to pair peers with families. We're also thinking about, if a peer has families that are transitioning out of the program and might only need a touch point once a month, can a coach now take on additional families? And is the caseload a little bit lighter for them, right? So these are all of the different sort of combinations, the recall, the memory that the AI and the technology is able to support us in to ensure that a peer not only is able to support many families at once, but also has all of the tools necessary to support those families. And I think oftentimes with AI, like one of the main kind of selling points for it is we can serve hundreds of thousands of people all at once with an AI chatbot. And once again, we're not saying that a single peer should serve hundreds of families all at once. But what's amazing about AI is it ensures that the sort of quality that is maintained in a really strong relationship between peer and caregiver can now be maintained across peers and across caseloads. That's really what we're trying to do with this AI is that maintenance of quality at the core of everything. And Kelsey, I know you shared a little bit more about one of the skills that was incredibly impactful for you, but I'm curious, in a moment of crisis, which is pretty cyclical for a lot of the families that we work with and tends to be a point of time of pushing down and incredible stigma and not reaching out. I'm curious how navigating crises changed after leveraging Psyche.
Yeah, so the crisis point with Reese came not long before I was able to be a part of the Psyche program. At the end of the first half of third grade, right as we had completed the testing process, Reese had gotten in trouble at school so many days that they asked that he not return to the campus until he go to a behavior modification program that was outside of the school. Unfortunately, I agreed to do that. He only went 3 days. On the third day, when he came home and told me what he had experienced, I immediately pulled him. Fortunately, we were coming right up to winter break, so I just alerted the school that he would not be returning after that because they wouldn't let him back on campus unless he did this program, which was very traumatic and a horrible way to treat children. So when I first started meeting with Mel, I had now transitioned him to a whole new school, whole new expectations. And of course, the behaviors began to begin again. And so having this parallel of this new experience, new challenges for me as mom and for Reese as a student, it was wonderful to have Mel sort of there side by side with me at that point, because as I started to get those emails and those phone calls, they began to ramp up. I was able to really just talk with Mel about what was happening. And I believe he was still in therapy at that time too. And so I was kind of triangulating what the therapist would say was going on, and I would go over that with Mel. So she was really a tremendous support for me, both in the school side, also in the outside therapy side. It was like I had another person who, was incredibly wise. Sorry about the cat. Um, who was able to help me take in that information, digest that information, be calm in these new situations as they arose. And I think a key part of that was helping me really focus on, what is the fear right now? Not feeling, again, I said that earlier, not feeling all of the stuff, but okay, this is what's in front of you. Let's look at that. And what do you need as Kelsey? And what might we try to support Reese in that moment? That was incredibly freeing and something that I think I still do now. All I know is that I'm much calmer now than I was 3 years ago. So, yeah, she just gave me the support and sense of peace and the ability to have a lens where I could just tackle the thing. Just what's the right next thing to do.
Right. And I'm curious, Kelsey, was this a moment that had occurred uh, like fairly early on in your psyche process or in the middle of your journey or at the end? I find it quite interesting. I know when we've talked to a lot of caregivers, in a moment of crisis, it's just really hard to turn anywhere. And it's ultimately a lot of times in that post-crisis period, where they might reach out for help, but there might not be an active challenge going on, so they may not know who to ask questions to and what sort of questions to ask. But what I find really interesting is there being a crisis that pops up and, the relationship already being there with Mel, to navigate that challenge and be a kind of intersection between navigating the outpatient services as well as the school system.
Yeah, I think what was really critical for me is I think Mel helped me not fully heal from that crisis that we had gone through and the guilt that I carried from allowing Reese to participate in that program, let alone just not seeing for such a long time how much he was hurting and struggling and not acting sooner. She helped me sort of be okay with that so that I wasn't carrying that load into here comes the next thing. Because I really did begin to, I mean, that's what I felt like. What fresh new hell do we have today? I mean, that was kind of my attitude. And so giving me that grace internally so that I could look at the next thing that came up and be, okay, we're going to just tackle this now. And again, not feel all the stuff that had come before it. So I feel incredibly lucky and blessed of the timing of all of that. Because I don't know if I had not had Mel and the Psyche program in my life at that time, I feel like that cycle would have just started again at the new school.
Thank you for sharing that. And, this is a point that we've drilled in a couple of times at this point, but I think to Kelsey's mention of moments of crisis, it's a person that she turned to. It's Mel and their relationship, and that's really the stronghold here in a lot of the program, and it being a place that's also perfectly timed, right? Like a coincidental timing and perfect timing of being able to access that support. And AI oftentimes kind of enables that sense of trust building, but also good timing. As mentioned, we track a lot of these warning signs, triggers, escalation points, and make sure that we're doing proactive support, which is something that we've been building over the course of the past few years. And that's been really instrumental in making sure that peers can reach out at a moment of time, where a parent may not necessarily be thinking about who to reach out to next or what next step to do, but is in need of that sort of proactive support. And another piece that I think is critical, and as Mel is also mentioning her work as a supervisor and a coach to the coach team, right? The role of AI in quality. And Mel, I'm curious to hear if you have any perspectives to share on supervision, on quality, and how technology has been augmenting all the support that you've been offering our other coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. I think our style of coaching is quite different to what is typically offered in most environments. And so, to some extent, it takes some time for coaches to adapt to that style. And the AI has been incredibly helpful in redirecting learning opportunities, growth, and identifying areas of development for coaches. So, how we make sure that coaches are truly connecting with the person they're working with, how we know that they're delivering quality, and the content meets the need of that family. It enables me to be able to quickly we can a coach could flag something on our system and say, I'm stuck on this, or I'm not sure what to do here, and I can immediately go in and look at that and give them specific support for that family on what needs to happen next or other ways of dealing with this next time. That means that we are continually improving and growing both in the development of our tech and in our coaches. And really, when I'm looking for coaches, I'm looking for growth. I'm looking for the ability to reflect, and I'm looking for sort of a non-defensive mindset. So where they're going to take on board learning and growth and improvement. And sometimes the language I encourage is more directive. And sometimes what I'm looking for in people is that they can analyze and understand the needs of the family as a whole, rather than looking at just a child's needs. We also live in a culture that is very litigious. So a lot of advice and recommendations is based on the fear of litigation rather than the needs of the family. And we really want to be really clear about how we address a risk or a need within an appropriate context. And people are not getting information that necessarily serves the family well. And so that is something I feel we've really been able to tune into. And again, that's partly due to our systems that can flag things quickly. I'm a very visual person as well. So it needs to be like red and up here. And I'm like, oh, click on that, Mel, so it really helps me. And that's true actually of most of our brains, right? It's not just about note taking, visual information and reducing the mental load of both me and the coaches really helps us be more efficient. It helps us identify the biggest needs first rather than because the families come to us with such a plethora of diverse needs, it's really easy for a coach to get lost in the weeds. And so we want a system that helps them know this is the number one, number two priority today. And that really helps continue the quality of what we deliver.
Right. One thing that you mentioned that I'm now really thinking about that I think might be applicable to a lot of the organizations in the room is there is a different flair and flavor of the approaches of each one of our organizations, right? And one thing that we really made sure we did at the beginning of Psyche was we knew that we wanted the service to be built outside of the systems that already had harbored so much distrust and misguidance for the caregivers that we were working with. So we didn't want to replicate the pre-existing system. We wanted to know at the core, what are the questions that caregivers are asking? What are the skills that are actually supportive to them? And we did a lot of this exploration work, right? And co-creation with caregivers early on. And the beauty of being able to use technology is the inputs are where the magic happens, right? It's what we've come to as an organization as part of our mission, our values, and our approach here. And technology is kind of the reinforcement layer on top of all of that. Mel, you mentioned these like specific qualities of a peer that we really want to highlight and we really want to support and we think is really instrumental in building that relationship across a telephone or a telehealth screen, right? And being able to identify what these soft skills are or points of success are for our program has allowed us to now build systems that are informed on those variables. So being able to be clear about what our mission was as an organization, the values that we had in our approach allowed for us to build this technology layer and system that reflected who we were at our core and who we continue to be. And one thing that's also interesting that Mel highlights is this is iterative, like this is ever changing, right? So coaches give feedback, caregivers give feedback, and we can go back to our assumptions as an organization and say, was this truly helpful, or are there ways that we can continue to change our approach and change our technology to better serve the needs of families? And we've seen that this iteration has allowed for us to impact families at scale. We've had a couple of larger scale pilots and cohorts that we've served, whether it was recruiting them via online or recruiting them via emergency department discharge or inpatient programs. And we're seeing a couple of trending themes here. Number one, because of this iteration and because of this feedback we're getting from caregivers find this service to be incredibly useful. We ask caregivers what their score on perceived usefulness is after every single session, and we have a 9.7 out of 10 for perceived usefulness on average across all of the sessions for all of the caregivers that we've served to date. Number two, we're really proud of our no-show rate. Oftentimes when we're pitching our organization to larger systems, whether it's health systems or Medicaid payers, one of the biggest pieces of feedback is, these are a lot of families that have multiple jobs to juggle or tasks to manage or siblings in the family. Like how can you even retain a mom who's already dealing with so much on her plate? And I think Kelsey highlighted this as part of her story, right? And being able to focus on making everything digestible for the family has enabled for caregivers to feel more confident in trusting us with our program, right? Something that's immediately actionable and they can see the impact of. And because of that, we see very low no-show rates generally for our families. In addition, being able to serve families via telephone and telehealth has enabled a lot of this. A lot of our caregivers will take calls from their closet or their car if this means that they have a brief moment in their day to allocate to the Psyche program. And we find that to be really special, is that combination of, what the caregiver perceives as useful, and then, their willingness to continue sticking with the program that for the first time for many of these caregivers is the first program that they've actually trusted and are really excited to use. And then number three, we've been really keen on tracking these clinical outcomes and metrics that matter a lot to these systems. The way we really built the service is we said, what do the caregivers need? How do we build something that the caregiver actually wants to use and feels seen by, feels heard by, and sees results in the home environment? And then how do we make sure that we can translate that for health systems, clinical partners, payers, so that they actually see the value in this? And one thing that I mentioned with this recurring sort of moment of crisis is a lot of caregivers will turn to emergency departments or other points of crisis care because they don't know what to do in these moments. They don't know where to turn, and they don't have anyone as support. And what we've noticed is in our cohorts, particularly our cohorts at MedStar Health System in Maryland, as well as Mass General Hospital in Boston, is we're seeing about a 94% reduction in ED visits for these families that we uptake in post-crisis transitions. Oftentimes, these are the families that enter the emergency department once every month or once every couple of months for the sake of crisis. And a lot of these parents are now able to navigate these crises at home if they were preventable kind of ED escalations. And that's something that we're really proud of, is being able to tie in these caregiver metrics that families really care about to the larger system priorities to ensure that this is something that can be scaled for the long term. And Kelsey, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what you would hope family peers might know or organizations might know, especially as they're thinking about maybe providing services like a Psyche service or implementing technology in conjunction with the services they're already providing.
Sure. I think, an important point is I would have had, prior to this experience, a worry about a technology like AI, perhaps assigning a feeling or assigning a diagnosis or something like that. And particularly in the area of our emotions, if you were to receive a report and it captures, a moment in the call saying that the parent was anxious and that's not what I felt, then the trust would be gone again. And so many parents and caregivers have already had experiences that were not positive in other systems. I think it's a really vulnerable moment in time, right? And so I did not have that experience. I feel like it was very effective in capturing our conversation in a very authentic way. And again, allowing the space for the relationship between Mel and I to grow and the trust stay there. So if that's a worry that others have, that was not my experience. And I know particularly with your team that that's something that you all take very seriously because you've asked about it. So, I mean, I think all in all, it really allowed the peer relationship to flourish in a way that was, unique and surprising and long lasting. And some of those preconceived notions perhaps that I had about technology, I did not see those come through. I left that program, calmer, feeling more hopeful, more in control. And I would say I would describe my parenting now as calm and curious. So when he does, some bumbleheaded thing, I'm not immediately feeling upset or angry or whatever. I can have a conversation with him and say, why on earth would you choose to do that? And part of what I've discovered is some of the hurt that he experienced was because he didn't feel seen or heard. There were a lot of understandings, at least from his perspective. And so now I'm able to support him in a way where he does feel seen and heard, even if I don't like the answer that I get. But by staying calm and curious, I can, really support him and still be the parent that I need to be. But again, the technology allowed for a lot of that to happen in the time that I got to spend with Mel. And for me, getting the notes right afterwards was just a huge lifesaver because I could go and look at that and say, oh yeah, we talked about this. I'm going to try this week and kind of hold myself accountable. Then having the check-in text, back that up even further. So um, it was all a positive experience. And again, I know you've added so much more since we were working together. So
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, thank you for highlighting those experiences because I think oftentimes one of the points of reluctance for an organization to implement AI is like, how does this now affect um, our interactions with the families that we serve or the individuals that we serve in the community? And being able to have your voice to highlight that this is something that previously might have caused some fears and being able to see that it's leveraged in a way where you're maintaining that relationship with Mel, but this is something that can help with reminders and touch points. Like that's the beauty of the program, and we're really grateful and humbled by your story, and just wanted to reemphasize that I'm grateful for you sharing your story today. And we have a couple of more points on amplification. I know that we're at a little bit past the top of the hour, and I want to make some space for questions, so we'll just breeze through the next couple of slides. But amplification on this sort of work means an amplification of technology means that technology is not taking full accountability of the work that was the relationship. Technology is here to support the relationship that already exists between, the peer, any sort of judgment calls or escalation. And this enables us to expand our reach. We can think about serving a lot more families across different states because of the technology at hand. The relationship does not get thinner as a result of the technology. We're able to increase our own capacity as an organization through the technology. One thing that Mel mentioned is, we're not done with implementing technology and we're not at our limit of where technology can go. She mentioned the simpler visual summaries, not only for coaches, but also for caregivers. We have a lot of text right now, and we're actively thinking through ways that we can better communicate the goals, the progress, and the difficulties to both the caregivers and the coach to make it a lot more easy to interpret as you're moving forward. And I think that's what's so exciting is things are changing. The landscape is rapidly evolving. The needs of caregivers and coaches is rapidly evolving as we continue to grow our program and expand across different geographies. So how does the tech now reflect those needs? Happy to share more in a bit, but yeah, I think if you're sitting with this decision, a lot of key questions, at least from the peer's perspective, should be, how is this technology actually being implemented? Is this going to replace my connection with the recipient of services, or what is this actually doing on the back end? Who sees what I write? What does it do without me? When is my judgment call actually integrated into decision making with these tech layers? And for program leaders and organizations that are evaluating whether or not to leverage tech, what are these tasks that are really taking away from the ability to provide a service at high quality for your organization? And what are these tasks that oftentimes are repetitive and take a lot of time, but ultimately can be outsourced to a tech layer that doesn't need as much of the relationship building and the context of the person across the screen or in person. And yeah, I am happy to answer any additional questions about what your organizations might be facing. And I bet Kelsey and Mel will have a lot of perspectives on where AI can and can't support an organization. But with that, wanted to move into Q&A and discussion, and also feedback if anyone has any thoughts about the way that we're thinking about AI as an organization and the direction of our organization moving forward. But thank you so much, Kelsey and Mel, for sharing both of your experiences. And it's the people at the center of all the work that we're doing, and we're just happy to be able to hear both of your perspectives today. So thank you. And with that, would love to start taking some questions.
That was such a powerful presentation. But I do have to say it's powerful for me personally because I was able to work with Malika when this was just an idea in her head and watch this grow. And it's just amazing, Malika, what you've done. And Kelsey, I've traveled your journey for quite some time, and to see you so relaxed, and this is just a different experience. So just seeing that makes me realize how wonderful this has been. But with all of that, we have questions. So let us get started on some questions. Melinda, you have your hand raised, and that's wonderful. Just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
So one, thank you. This was a beautiful presentation. And as somebody who has pretty severe dyslexia, I've been using AI type tools long before they were called AI, dictation type softwares and different things. And I've been very excited with the integration of AI as it's held. There's always been flaws with dictation for as long as, and so as we've integrated AI, what I'm coming up against, and I use it in very similar ways, Melanie, as you said, as a, because I am a coach, I'm a peer coach for all Oregon Family Support Specialists, and then I'm also the statewide certifier, and so I use it in a lot of the ways that you're talking about. What I have found is a lot of resistance, not of the parents per se, but of organizations or of people saying, wait a second, who's recording this? What do you mean that's being recorded? And I'm always trying to tell them the recording is not going anywhere. It's just to help me be able to stay present. So I'm not trying to write and lose train of thought. How are you helping? I guess my question is, how do you help people understand the difference between things being recorded and maybe how that might have been used in clinical settings against families and the way that we're using recording? Because I think there's a lot of fear around my words are being recorded and how in the past for families that's been used, that's been weaponized. And so how do you approach that?
Yeah, I'm happy to share the perspective of an organization. And then Mel, if you have perspectives of delivery as a coach, I would also love to kind of hear your thoughts on this. I think in terms of an organization, there's a couple of things that I want to highlight, at least with Psyche. It's kind of implemented organization wise, or across all of our peers and coaches. So we have integrated into our systems, and this is something that we've been thinking about a lot from day one. And we haven't had much caregiver pushback in terms of opting in for the sessions, especially as we highlight that this is for the sake of, our memory, for or the peers memory specifically, and then also improving the program as we're moving forward. And this is for quality ultimately. I think one thing that's really interesting about our program is because we don't sit underneath another clinical model or a hospital, there is relatively less fear about who is accessing what information. So a lot of the families that we're working with already is accessing outpatient therapy. They're navigating a lot of challenges with the school environment, but we sit as a separate entity to all of those systems, and we're not integrating within any of those systems. So this comes with its own challenges, but also its benefits, where we do truly stand as a caregiver only and separate entity. So I think it has a little bit of benefit when we are presenting this to caregivers specifically. And we're not reporting back any of this information to the health systems that we're integrated in. We're essentially a third party service, which I think is highlighted in the conversations with caregivers. This is not going to be released to any of your providers. This is here mostly for quality of service delivery and making sure that we can remember everything that you share moving forward. But Mel,
Yeah, and I do work for multiple organizations and work for myself as well. So I have not personally experienced pushback on using AI or even recording sessions. I do preface it with this is about I'm huge on reducing mental load. So really it's about, hey, this is going to be owned by you, and this is how it's used. And I haven't had a huge pushback with that. If I was sitting under the umbrella of an organization, I think it would come down to their contracts and what they say and how they use it, right? As to what offers reassurance or doesn't. And that would be outside of my control if I was under their umbrella. Psyche Care, I think we just have a lot of trust because we're a small entity. And I think as well, we do truly talk the talk and walk the walk. So that builds a lot of trust and connection. And I suppose it reduces the fear of what we might be using things for. We don't put things on social media, we don't use it for anything else. And it really is about capturing information in the moment and then using that to serve the parents. So I think it depends a little bit for you. I think it was Melinda, and the umbrella you sit under, or who you're working for or with. And some of that will be down to what their policies are. And it sounds like some people just had their fingers burnt by large organizations, which is making me feel very sad, which, we can't change that, but we have found that we've been able to foster trust.
That's great. Thank you, guys. This question is for all three of you. I think we would like each of your perspectives. The question is, do you see AI replacing live peer work? Now, I know this is live work, but I think the question is about person to person, physical person to person. What do you guys think?
Should I jump in first?
Sure.
I don't think so. And I don't want to sound naive on that, but I truly do not think AI can replicate that dynamic. I think it's doing a great job in supporting what we do, in identifying and analyzing sessions and helping us pull out information. If it comes to the point where AI can replace that, I think we should just get off the planet. I do think I think we're going to use AI to its maximum benefit. And I think if it swings to that, I think we all already get frustrated when every help desk on every website is a chatbot now. Like it's really live representation, I want to speak to a person. We're already hammering, and I think there may be a swing back down the line, because or people will just not use the services that do that, and therefore it'll push people to choose and seek out services with real people, because we don't feel emotion and connection with an AI. It's useful, it's a tool. I find it helpful, but we cannot replace that nuance of connection, or I don't think we can. Elon Musk might say otherwise, but that's my view.
Mel, I agree with you. It takes 10 prompts to get AI right now to put out a decent flyer when you provided all the information. So I'll just leave it at that. And even if it improves, in my mind, and I agree, maybe I'm being naive, there's no way that a chatbot can look at the complexities of my life, dealing with the school system, learning that Reese had allergies, the stress on the marriage, the fact that my dog had just died literally right before all this happened. And I was trying to foster another one that was a disaster. All of those things are going on in my life, and I can't imagine any robotic response that would be helpful. Whereas simply hearing your voice was already a connection that would help me relax my shoulders when we would get on a call because of what the relationship that we developed.
Yeah.
I think one thing I wanted to add is, we have families that just feel so supported and feel so much of a friendship with our peers that they text a happy Thanksgiving and Merry Christmas to their peer. I have not once thought about doing that with my AI, I will say. And I think that highlights like what Kelsey and Mel are both mentioning of that relational aspect of a peer is, first of all, the reason why peer support exists. It's to be able to bring in lived experience to support, and it's going to become all the more important as, AI introduces all of these problems. I am of the full belief that, to combat a lot of these grander, large scale societal issues, at the core of it will be human to human relationships. And, I understand that all of us are biased, but there is just no replacement for that peer work. We're seeing it in the families that we're already serving. We're seeing it when they say, we don't want to talk to a bot. We want to talk to a person that understands what I've been through before. And if someone needs it, then it shall continue to exist and people will continue to need it.
Very good. Along with that, and Malika, this may be a question for you. There's a question about privacy and how do you safeguard people's privacy in this AI world?
Yeah, definitely. Our company has gone through all of the compliance um, necessities for working with these larger partners and also working with families. So we're HIPAA compliant. And with the families, we're not releasing information outside of the context of our CRM system. So we have our own tech system that has gone through that, HIPAA compliance certification, and um, we're not releasing information outside. And all of the information that is stored is ultimately for the sake of the family's case and the sake of the peer tracking that sort of memory, as well as the caregiver receiving kind of updates and um, the progress notes and the check-ins and whatnot. And I think that's something that's really critical about our organization. Is one of the main ways that we are able to navigate this privacy question is we're not super integrated into other organizations. So that's one key part of it. And then another part is, caregiver consent and opted in, being very clear about the fact that AI is being leveraged. This is the information that is being documented. This is the information that's not being documented. Of course, as a part of HIPAA compliance, de-identification is a huge piece, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're losing the context of the family over time, right? So we've built our entire system in-house. We built our system to reflect the needs of the caregivers and the peers. And then after we felt very comfortable and confident with what we've built, we sought compliance as necessary. And that's critical, it's important, and it's necessary for implementation as a referral partner or a serving organization in any of the states that we're in.
Now, I think you answered what my follow-up question was going to be, but let's just make sure. Psyche falls under HIPAA compliance, correct?
Correct.
So this information is privileged.
Mhm.
Excellent.
Or this information as in the presentation or the
No,
information?
no. When you're working with families.
Yes, exactly. So it's privileged information. And our depending on the state, we're noticing different supervision requirements. And I think this is everyone in the room knows this of whether it's a clinician or it could be a peer-to-peer based supervision. So just depending on that, we also have different kind of clinical setups depending on the states that we're in, whether we can be a true family-run organization or like an MSO-PC setup, and that tends to affect a lot of kind of the privacy, the liability questions, and how we're navigating infrastructure. But ultimately, we're working with the system, we're not working underneath the system, and that allows us to not only kind of abide by the compliance rules and the complexities, but also built up that trust with the caregiver to know that all the information is simply being used for the betterment of our program and the delivery of services to them.
Great, great. We've got questions about expansion. Do you foresee this being something that could be used with the school system or other service groups? What's your vision?
Yeah, definitely. It was so interesting because we'd like to call ourselves like an early stage startup organization. And a big thing with startups is rapid testing and iteration. And this doesn't mean testing and iteration with parents and what we're delivering to parents. We want to make sure that our program is of the highest quality. But where we really tested was how are we uptaking parents and caregivers? Where in the community can we really reach them? And how do we ensure the highest likelihood of success and kind of integration into the feelings, the needs, and the wants of the caregivers that we're working with. As I mentioned in the presentation, before we even put pen to paper on what Psyche could be, we interviewed hundreds of caregivers. And one thing that we did in that journey was journey mapping of, when is a caregiver actively looking for help? When does a caregiver feel like, they've got it, they have it all under control, and they don't need anything else? And what's interesting is we focus on crisis, not because I know it's a huge system priority and a lot of payers and health systems might say we need you to focus on crisis. But the reason we focused on that is time and time again, caregivers mention the sliver of opportunity that they have to try something new completely. And one thing that we hear from caregivers is they don't know what family peer support is, or they've never worked with the coach, and therefore it's not something that they may try in between moments of crisis. But when they're desperate to find something that will help their family, help their child, they're willing to try something that's new. So that's the reason that we focused on high acuity points of care. So this could be emergency departments or inpatient programs or partial hospitalization programs. But this doesn't mean that a caregiver is not coming in to the licensed clinical social worker at the school and saying, I'm in a moment of crisis and I need support, right? So there is alignment with school systems, outpatient therapy. We actually were working in Minnesota, so where Mel's at, and partnering with primary care clinics and outpatient care clinics because they have a lot of youth that are coming in with severe emotional disturbances, and the parents just don't know what to do. So the reason we focus on crisis is not because it's a model specifically built for crisis. It's just that we've noticed that that is a point of time in the care continuum that caregivers feel most kind of open to trying something new. But we also see caregivers that will come to other support services and points of or touch points in the community, and they're actively looking for something. And that can oftentimes be the school and outpatient services.
Absolutely.
And I just want to back that up really, is that I see Psyche Care being embedded in multiple different systems. I think there is such a huge role for us within school systems or aligned alongside them, and parents in early intervention, because often parents are coming to us exhausted, depleted, the end of the line. I would love to get there earlier before they hit that point. And that's something that we do in our program is we give specific measurable tools. What do you do and say when you find your child self-harming? How do you practically, truly address that behavior other than hide all the sharps, right? And so really, let's get there earlier in every setting because there are gaps across the whole system, across the country in different areas. And so, yes, I see us having a role everywhere, to be honest.
This is probably more just of a reflection question for each of you. Psyche Care has just grown with leaps and bounds. I mean, it's amazing where you are, and it's so exciting to see. But if each of you could decide what the next step was going to be for Psyche, what would it be? Where would you want to see it move to? And anybody can answer. Whoever, you all have different perspectives, so I'd love to hear all of them.
Gosh, I mean, I would be everywhere. Like a person galloping on a horse to put my flag in the land, right? I'm like, let's go, let's do it. And it's really good that we have a very well balanced team who bring different things to the table, because I'm super passionate and want to go and expand and be everywhere. And I think it's really good to be systematic and grow appropriately so that we can grow at the pace where we can meet need, because you see a lot of companies grow too fast and quality falls off the table. So, but Malika, I'm gonna let you maybe speak to this before I get in there
Yeah,
too much.
yeah, definitely. We get, if we start ideating, we end up being on phone calls for hours because we get really excited about the direction of the organization. But, oftentimes we think about this general space of caregiving, and we see a lot of excitement around caregiving for elderly Americans or caregiving for, individuals with medical complexities. And we define the families that we work with as, or the caregivers we work with as caregivers of youth with severe emotional complexities. But how do we now expand uh, the types of caregivers that we can even serve? So, we're already working with some foster caregivers, and that has been incredibly fruitful. And we're noticing some gaps that the foster system is not able to service that we really think we can uniquely service. We've seen some cases where the caregivers are also feeling exhausted because there's a lot of medical intervention in the home environment that they just can't manage outside of the core relational health challenges or emotional complexities. So we want to be able to expand to caregiving point blank period more generally. And whether this means caregivers of youth, caregivers of adults, we really see ourselves fitting in different touch points in the community, as well as with different kind of reasons for coming in for Psyche. We think that there can be support for anyone, especially if they're mostly concerned with the relational health between themselves and their loved one. But Kelsey, I'm curious, especially given your experience in the program, how you might see opportunities for growth.
I have two answers. One is where would I like to see you guys go up next? I would like to be back with Mel. So if I could just sign up again, that would be great. We just started middle school and I'm sure some things are coming, even though so far day 8, it's been great. No, what was occurring to me is that I know it's been a challenge in the family peer workforce to provide research data and to quantify the value of a story like mine. And so I would love to see that what you're learning as Psyche grows and develops can connect to help underscore the value of family peers of that workforce, that work as a whole, not just within your program, so that it can be a litmus test or a data point that can help support better reimbursements and value in general of the family peer workforce.
Yeah, I love that point because, we've talked to a lot of family-run organizations that are sitting on troves of data and have worked with so many more families than we have and have been in existence for dozens of years, but don't necessarily know how to translate that data and make it communicable. And um, one thing that's interesting about Psyche is like from day one, we talked to all the systems leaders that were tasked with implementing this sort of innovative work. And I'm excited for a lot of the organizations in the room today and beyond that are already doing incredible work in family peer support to leverage, the data that they already have and the services that they already have to paint a different narrative. So you already have all the tools in your toolkit. Now, how do you use that to paint a different picture of the work that you're doing so that it's a lot more easily understood by folks that actually make decisions on how this gets implemented. I think that's also super exciting. Kelsey, I appreciate you bringing up that point.
Now, go ahead, Linda. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Thank you. Guys, thank you so much for this webinar is such a different focus than what we usually do. And this is just so exciting. Thank you for being with us today. Mel, what a pleasure to meet you and see your excitement. Malika, always wonderful to be with you. And Kelsey, we so appreciate you sharing your story.